And we're back with the Professional Speakers Radio Show and our very special guest, Marilyn August, owner of Sticky Profiles. And we're talking about virtual networking and, to a certain degree, prospecting and reputation management and all the wonderful things that really factor into how your business does what it does in the world of business to business or even business to consumer sales today. So I wanted to start with a question in this segment about how profiles kind of reflect the seller's needs as far as trying to find out what their way of doing business is, what their preferred interactions are like, or maybe how the information on their profiles kind of gives the buyers, or in this case the sellers, an insight into their reputation or what it's like to do business with them.
Okay, that's a great question. I'm not sure that it's the seller's reputation management can be done through having a robust, yes, it can be done through having a robust profile. So let me go deeper into this and say every part of this profile is incredibly important. Everything from your branded cover, which I'm surprised at how many people have the default, and your headline. You have 120 characters. Nobody cares that you have an MBA. Nobody cares that your job title. If you're an attorney, there's a gazillion attorneys. They care about what problem you solve. So I spend a lot of time writing headlines. Headlines are really important because, as we all know, people don't read. Or they do read somewhat, but they don't read, and they do read. But if you don't grab their attention with the headline, forget the rest of it.
Yeah. So
here's my personal philosophy of profiles. And, there's a gazillion LinkedIn gurus that all do it different way. A profile is not an ad. It's not a resume. Here's what it is. It's personal branding. So the summary section is about you. I always write them in the first person. If it's a team, I might say we. So I just worked with a company with a family-owned business. It was a team, and he wanted to include the team. But each person's unique value to the company was different. So I wrote the profiles differently on the summary statement for the owner of the company, who was more strategic, than for the salespeople. So it's personal branding, it's a value proposition. What do I bring to your party? And frankly, my style is to target in the first two lines what the target market is. So mine says something like, if you want to fill your pipeline, if you're a B2B business, because I don't work with B2C businesses. It's on 100% B2B. And if you don't know what B2Me means, you're probably not one of my prospects.
Exactly.
So I ask questions. Yeah, I ask questions. So the summary statement's personal branding. I can include some testimonials in there if I want. Now we get to the experience section, and this is what's changed. This is another reason why you can't do it yourself, because LinkedIn's constantly changing. The experience section is a company profile, but since it defaults open, I have enough characters in there to put a testimonial or two, to put a call to action. And I tend to also, Chris, you're probably going to laugh at this, I'll go through somebody's profile and I will remove non-relevant experience. So in college, if you had a retail job and you're now a SaaS salesperson, I'm going to remove the college retail because it has nothing to do with what you're doing now. So even the experience section is targeted to credibility, to visibility. What am I doing now? We can include a video link now in your summary statement. And I tend to do that. We'll put whatever, I think it's up to 5 pieces of media in your summary statement so that you've got a website. It's basically a billboard to millions and millions of prospects, but it has to be client facing or customer facing. It's not about you. Anytime, in fact, I think I have a whole file of lousy,
Okay.
worst practices. And any profile that starts with I love, or I'm passionate about, or I give great customer service, what I want to write them back is, oh, you give great customer service. I give lousy customer service. You know, how ridiculous is
I
that?
only
How
serve
silly.
lousy customers. Actually, my wife and I just had an
Yeah.
example of that. There's a building next door to my wife's office, and they have a sub shop in there, and it says whatever the name is, Fresh Subs. And driving by, I said, so sometimes these words, their inclusion doesn't really help, because I can't think of anybody who would be putting a sign up that says expired subs, used subs, stale subs. That
Exactly.
just reinforces your point. And that brings up the next part of this question, which is, do people really understand that their profiles are a lot like what you find on Yelp?
I don't think so.
So
And I'm
let me go into that. You're talking off air about the example where if you're sitting at an intersection and wondering what restaurant to go to, you Google the ones that you're looking at. Up pops the menu. Up pops the Yelp review, and you say, I'll give that one a try, but I won't give that one a try, because all that information is right in front of you. And now, as an employee or prospective employee, or as a salesperson or whatnot, we get to do exactly the same thing. Oh, you reached out to me. Let me take a look at your profile, salesperson. Oh, really? This is your one and only job listed, and you started yesterday, and I'm supposed to buy from you. Good luck with that. Click, block, done, right? Do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
yeah, that analogy works. When you said Yelp, you kind of threw me. That analogy works, yes. And it's basically you are being checked out. Uh, I love that example of the person who's only been there for a month or two. I've done some things that maybe make you look more credible, but they'll go two places. A prospect will go two places. They'll go to your website and they'll go to LinkedIn. They will not go to Facebook if they're a B2B business. So your analogy is great. The difference today is that we would make a phone call, we would book an appointment, go into an office, and there'd be a face-to-face, and we'd build credibility right there in the first meeting. We didn't have to do all this engagement to get the first meeting. And the choice that people have today is they have many choices of where to buy and who to buy from. And you are basically in your LinkedIn profile and your LinkedIn activity, and let's get to LinkedIn posting, you're basically building your reputation. You call it reputation management.
Sure.
I call it brand management. Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's, can I trust this person to do business with them? Because people do business with people they trust. They have to know them first. They have to like them. We don't do business with people we don't like. In fact, I just
Shark
yesterday,
Tank. There's some people there, if Mr. Wonderful, if I had to, I guess. Yeah.
if he had my portfolio of companies,
Yeah.
and he was a good fit. But I want to tell you a quick story. A friend of mine was making a referral, and I read the person's profile, and I read down towards the bottom of the profile for education and saw that she had listed a personal growth training that was very popular in the 80s and 90s. And I looked at that and I said, boy, that's going to be a really turnoff for some of her prospects. And I'm going to take that off when I get hired and I need to redo her profile. So I knew that was good. So I shared that with my referral, and the person who was making the referral, oh no, she would have gotten really upset about that. She really thought that was important. So her ego was more important than her credibility, and we weren't a good fit. Thank goodness she decided not to work with me, because we would have butt heads. The point of the matter is that what I did with a prospect that wanted to pay me, not that I wanted.
Yeah.
So they were already a prospect. It was already qualified, and I still went and checked her out. Do I want this person as a client?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing when I want to sell you my services. You know, at one point, not so long ago, my friend who was making the referral would have just put her on the phone with me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that she was associated with this particular company who has a mixed reputation. I wouldn't have known anything about her before I was selling her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference. You alluded to this more so than I did, and I think this is something that people really miss on LinkedIn. The sales intelligence is gold. It's just gold. I mean, I avoided, this woman would have ended up being my worst client. She would have said lousy things about me. Talk about reputation management.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been wrong. She would have been that client from hell. And instead, by reading her profile, I knew it wasn't a fit before I really had this debate with myself. Marilyn, take the money, I kept telling myself. If she wants to hire you, take the money. And I kept saying, gosh, I just don't believe in what she's doing. These two voices were going in my head. I don't believe in what she's doing. I don't think I'd be good for her. She doesn't have a good business model. Gosh, take the money and shut your mouth, girl. And fortunately, if you believe in, as I do, that things take care of themselves, she decided not to work with me. And that's a pretty long explanation of credibility and reputation management.
But
Did I answer the question?
Well, absolutely. And it leads into another discussion about identifying your ideal customer avatar on LinkedIn. So when we come back from our next break, I think I want to walk us into that and how that matches into virtual networking, which is another really strong suit of yours. And we'll get ready to that just as soon as we get back from the latest break. Again, this is the Professional Speakers Radio Show. And I'm your host, Chris Kerr, and I have the hiccups. And we're back with the Professional Speakers Radio Show. And our guest, Marilyn August, owner of Sticky Profiles, was talking to us about this decision that every business owner, every coach, every consultant, we've all encountered this. The customer that's present with the money that's willing to pay versus the ideal customer that you really want. And I hope I put that as diplomatically as can be, because we've all been there. And sometimes those customers cost us so much more than the money that they're bringing to the table. And sometimes it's just with them. I had one customer who had spent months asking this girl out and had her over for dinner every night. And every night at dinner time, the phone would ring. And it was the customer with an urgent emergency question. And I would give them advice, and they would do the exact opposite. And the next day, bring. Well, I did the opposite of what you told me to do, and it resulted in this catastrophic thing that you warned me about. So now how do I get my butt out of that? I could have killed them many times over.
I know
but
that.
I kept saying the money is good. The money is good. Not that much. So when you're working in this field, you're talking really about networking for your business objectives. And those are not always sales, by the way, but that networking process is different than it is in person, right? But we're talking about something that it has some similar traits, but it is a different beast. I'll give you one big difference that I'm aware of that the vast majority of businesses really haven't figured out. So obviously you're aware of the do not call and the canned spam laws and all that kind of stuff. Well, in 2007, something magical happened. The birth of social media interacting with CRM systems. And so companies would have their call centers reach out and some people would be put on the do not call registry, and then they would have a new salesperson come in. Shiny new salesperson. And the shiny new salesperson would import all their contacts and overwrite all those do not call registry lists. And now the company would be calling them because they have permission, because they hired somebody who is a personal friend of the individual. And now that company is getting sued because no, they don't.
Oh my goodness.
And it's happened over and over and over again because these technology issues multiply at a rate that is so fast and so dramatic that to correct them takes thousands and thousands of manual hours editing it out, because there's no algorithm that can determine if this is legit overwrite or not a legit overwrite. It all has to be manually checked, and no company has the hours to do that. So it's now become a cost of doing business to simply write checks because of this scenario. Imagine from a salesperson's point of view, the phone call you get from your friend who said, "Are you working for that bleepity bleep bleep company? I told them to go bleep themselves bleepity bleep ways to Sunday, and now they're calling me and they say it's your fault."
I had no idea.
And imagine that call. And it's happened every day somewhere in America.
Wow.
Technology has accelerated our ability to network and to screw somebody over by networking. So, with that context, and that's the liability risk bit I was talking about, the opportunity to work with and somewhat on behalf of people who are in this field don't have that kind of time, but they don't know which hats are theirs and which hats to delegate. How do you help them navigate through stuff like that?
Well, first of all, Chris, you've blown me away. Shows you how naive I am. I had no idea that was going on.
I've worked in too many ERP companies. It's just a cost of doing business at that point.
Wow. All right, so let me see if I can address this from two fronts. First of all, we didn't do any of my past history and how I got into this LinkedIn prospecting, but my background is I was doing one-to-one business development coaching. Based on what a coach of mine said, Marilyn, people hire you for one of three reasons. They hire you to solve people problems, they hire you to solve process problems, or they hire you to solve profit problems. Which one are you? And if there was no question, I didn't even hesitate. It's profit problems. So I worked with small business owners and salespeople, mainly on mindset issues, but also, and not instead of, worked on skill sets. And what I would do, this is a long way of telling you that the first thing we would do, and it was done on paper, and if anybody listening to this wants this exercise, they can have it. It was called Ideal Client Profile. And then before the word psychographic ever hit the common language, I would have people do not only a demographic of who they want to work with, but I would have them do what I call characteristics and traits. Mm-hmm. So and they usually reflect who you are. So stupidity makes me crazy. So on my ideal client profile, you'll see has to be intelligent, fairly driven. So I have a list, and they would change as my business evolved, as my company evolved. And you could tell what wasn't working in my business because I would take a negative and turn it into a positive. So for example, at one time in my career, believe it or not, I had trouble getting paid. So if you flip over this old journal written by hand, and I dated them to find out what the progress was, you will see a series of psychographics that says, thinks my fees are very reasonable, enjoys paying my fee, pays my fee on time. This was before I took credit cards. So I was invoicing and there was a gap in cash flow. So I laugh now, looking back at it. Now it's called the buyer's journey. But basically you start out with a very detailed, not only demographic, but psychographic of who you enjoy and what problem, who you enjoy because you're going to be working with them, and what problems you solve for them. And clarity is a process, not a project. So as I said, I had this journal that would evolve and turn and change over time. And I took whatever I didn't like and turned it from a negative to a positive. Now taking that to online networking. LinkedIn, in its glory and its wisdom, like all platforms, this is the game. You used to be able to search for free.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of it. You just and I know there's people that have go-arounds, but basically, if you're really going to use LinkedIn to prospect and network, you really have no choice but to buy their Sales Navigator. And their Sales Navigator does two things, in my opinion. And it's Microsoft's. I don't make any money on it,
Yeah.
but my clients have to have it. It gives you an enormous selection of filters. So, for example, on my ideal client profile, I work with smaller companies. Why do I work with smaller companies? Because I can get to the decision maker faster. If I'm working with a Fortune 1000, it's going to take them a little while to make a decision. So I prefer to work with companies where I can, if you will, control the game. So one of the filters I use in LinkedIn is size of company. So you can do a very, very detailed filtered search of who you're looking for. And in the process of doing this for clients, I've had to become much more technical than I had ever imagined. And I have one client who's very particular about who they connect with. And I had to learn how to do a Boolean search so that I can take out who they don't want. And I do a very refined search, and you've got to do it in Sales Navigator. And frankly, that's the only way to target your market, because if you're going to sit there and go through, oh, we recommend you should connect with Sally Sue and read everybody's profile. No, it's going to, gosh, manually, this is going to take hours. And so what? So somebody makes the connection request. And then so the second part of this, Chris, is the messaging. And this gets to my second pet peeve on LinkedIn. And I'm going to say it in capital letters because I'm not going to shout, but stop the pitching. Do not pitch me on LinkedIn. I don't know you. And now I definitely don't like you. And as I said, my last blog, I got more responses on that blog than just about anything I've ever done other than writing about a puppy. Is people hate it. They're offended by it. They'll never do business with you. I've even asked some people, is this working for you? So the messaging becomes critically important, and the messaging should be in the same genre as having met somebody brand new that you've never met, and not intimate at all, and personalized.
Well,
So
to extend on that, and it's really graphic imagery, but the notion that somebody is going to connect with me and instantly I'm going to know, like, and trust them, that they're going to share their most intimately held secrets of the value of whatever they are. I equate that to somebody sending me a stripogram message as soon as we say hello. Like, really? Is that really, can we just have a conversation? And when I do live networking, which is, to me, this is where it's very similar, equally,
that's right.
Pitching me in live networking, unless I'm at a trade show, really doesn't work. And I get most of my business, even at trade shows, simply by going up and saying, so what do you do, and what's stopping you from doing it today? What do? You tell me what's wrong. I'll help you find a way to fix it, whether it's through a contact or something that I know, or strategy or detail or something. That's how this works. It doesn't work by me pitching you, hey, I've got a product out my butt that just happens to solve that particular thing. It's not the Fuller Brush day of, let me open my big black sales bag. I don't have that to work with. First, everything I do is conceptual to begin with. But second, there's the challenge that most people don't even understand what their problems are. They're outside of their initial scope because, again, that forest and trees you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. So I love that discussion of how you identify the avatar, not just from the demographics, but the psychographics. And that's an area that is often left out of the discussion. Facebook talks a lot about the demographics. At least it used to. Now that it's not allowing you to search by demographics anymore anyway. But nobody really talks about the psychographics anymore. And that's a big part of this discussion. So we're going to take our last break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the challenge of doing it yourself and what specifically you can do to help somebody else get out of that multiple hat wearing problem that all of us face. All right. So this is the Professional Speakers Radio Show. I'm Chris Kerr, and we'll be right back after this short break. Once again, we're back with the Professional Speakers Radio Show. I'm your host, Chris Kerr, and our guest, Marilyn August, has been giving us fantastic information on how to optimize what we're doing on LinkedIn. But I want to come back to something we were talking about just before the end, where between the virtual networking, the prospecting, all that kind of good stuff, it gets overwhelming for an individual, let alone a business manager, an owner, to handle all of that. It's overwhelming. So, Marilyn, how do you and your team help those people corral this mess?
Well, as I've said before, the best way to corral that mess, number one, and this is call it outsourced marketing officer, and this is probably where you come in, Chris, is to have a strategy, is to have a game plan. Instead of buying a little bit of this and buying a little bit of that, or we'll try this for a while, or maybe we should do advertising. Oh, somebody said we needed our website redone. There are more people out there selling you whatever with no systematic strategy behind it. And that surprises me, frankly, because LinkedIn is one slice of all of this. However, it seems that with the work that I do, I get involved in things like content marketing and the group management. The best way I can help salespeople and business owners, particularly what I call a selling sales manager, who's been given a team, I call him Mike the sales manager, who is so good at sales that he got promoted, and now he's got these doofuses. You know this, you know Mike.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mike the sales manager. Now, Mike's quota is still Mike's quota. He's still got to produce. That's where he makes his money. But this company said, now, Mike, we're going to give you this team of 4 salespeople under you, and you're going to get a slice of their action, and you're now magically a manager. And Mike's going, oh my God, these jerks. What am I going to do with them? So Mike, the sales manager, the selling sales manager, is overwhelmed, he's got his own customers, got to keep his quota up, and the best way he can manage these characters that he looks at and says, what do you mean they don't know how to sell?
Yeah.
What do you mean I have to tell them to make a phone call? Is to turn it over to somebody like me. I basically do it for them. I do LinkedIn account management, which means that I write the messaging. Included, I have a pre-campaign setup for each account. We talked a lot about profiles. I interview and rewrite a profile. I don't have any restriction on the number of rewrites I do. I have been wordsmithed by one person, and we finally called a ceasefire on that because every other word was being wordsmithed. But I want the client to be happy and proud of their profile. I do the messaging, I do the connection requests, and yes, I use automated system to help me out with that, but I am in their account. I'm logged in as them. I'm ghosting as them. All they get is they get a screenshot if they need to make an immediate phone call. They also, the work product is a spreadsheet of leads. And then and you and I talked about this as get more and more into the sales process, what happens with that spreadsheet once it leaves my hand. So the spreadsheet is people's names, first name, last name, anything that's on LinkedIn. Yes, I can get email addresses. I get phone numbers. I get job titles. They get a pretty specific targeted sheet. They've had a conversation. They, me, ghosting as them,
Yeah.
has had a conversation with each and every person. Sometimes somebody reaches out to them and wants to talk to them right away. Had that happen with one client that, I can't say the person's name, but he connected with, or either I connected him or my management
Sure.
connected him with a very high name recognizable person on LinkedIn. And I immediately contacted the client and said, we've got to get back to this guy right away. Because I am in there looking at your messaging every day. The messaging is crafted so that basically we're doing a campaign on LinkedIn before we ever move it offline. Ultimately, Chris, you'll be so surprised to hear this. My goal is for them to get on the phone and book an appointment, schedule an appointment for a sales meeting. That's my goal.
Yeah.
That's all this is about, is getting a sales meeting for you so that you can then move into your sales process. All this other stuff, it's just to get you the sales, not just, but to get you a qualified sales meeting where you already have sales intelligence on that person and on that company, and you know their needs and wants, and you're talking to a decision maker, and they know you, you know them, at least to be able to say, how are your kids doing?
Yeah.
Or let me give you an example from my own life. I targeted Chicago salespeople. I'm giving away my secrets now. I used to live in Chicago. When I made a connection request, I didn't talk about what I do. I talked about the weather in Chicago, because it's usually pretty talkable, particularly if you're anywhere near Michigan Avenue.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I got like a 42% connection acceptance. So I wasn't talking about sales. I was talking about if I had met them in the Loop on Michigan Avenue and we were having lunch, the first thing we would have discussed is the lousy weather.
Yep. Or the cobblestones to trip over. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Chicago's a great town, by the way, except for the weather. So it's authentic marketing. When I heard the words authentic marketing, I cracked up because I didn't know there was any other kind.
Exactly.
But this is now a buzzword. In
You know,
case
you
you
do
haven't heard.
effective marketing. I really want to spend extra on this budget this year. Yeah.
So it's basically offloading. They never need to go into their inbox. They never need to do anything other than spend maybe 45 minutes with me to get their profile done, and then I meet with them once a week for a progress report, which sometimes evolves into sales coaching, what's happening with the prospects. So that's how you offload. You have to offload it. You can't do it yourself. And just to add another plug here, LinkedIn is messing with the algorithms all the time. My software developer that I used just got a notice from him saying, LinkedIn changed something, do this, and do this. Now, the average person, they don't want to be bothered with that. Frankly, I don't want to be bothered with that. But thank you, Microsoft. Just like they're always updating your software, they're always updating LinkedIn. They changed that when they changed that interface, the one where they move the photo.
Yeah.
They didn't notify anybody.
No, and they're not notifying most people of changes anymore at all. I've seen a number of changes that have just been done, and you show up and you go. The only thing I've had as a heads up is because I am connected to a lot of LinkedIn pros, their eyeballs are on it. And so if they're the early ones that get it, then my message feed is filled up with, did you see this change? I'm looking at my profile going, there's no change yet. Refresh. There it is, right? That's kind of where I find out about it for the most part when I'm paying attention. And obviously I've had to pay a little more attention lately, but I spent 3 years where short of messaging, I paid no attention. None. And I've got 30,000 connections. So I really ought to be paying more attention. You'd think. Nature of the beast. Well, we've had a delightful conversation. I appreciate it. And I think our audience has had a fantastic crash course in what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong in LinkedIn. Is there a particular event or talk or something that you have coming up in the next little while, or is there a good way and time for them to get a hold of you?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me is to go to my website, stickyprofiles.com, and schedule a strategy review. You can schedule right on my website. Obviously, Marilyn at Sticky Profiles is my LinkedIn, is my email address. And believe it or not, they can find me on LinkedIn.
There you go.
Love to know that you heard the program, and any other questions that you have. I also have a LinkedIn tips and scripts ebook that it's my gift. Just ask for it and you can have it. And if they want that psychographic, how to identify your ideal client profile exercise, I know normally don't give that out, but for your listeners,
Awesome.
they can have it, work
Awesome.
on it. It's fun.
Well, and it's so helpful to not have to deal with the person who, the common definition is that of an ask hole. You've heard what that is, right? That's somebody who asks for advice and then does the exact opposite.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, but we don't want as many of those as customers. We want more of the people who ask and then do. So yeah, great chatting with you. I appreciate your time today. We're going to have you back on. I'm sure we've got, as you said off air, we've got enough for a dozen conversations, I'm sure. And LinkedIn is always changing, so there's lots of good reasons to keep up with that as well. Our guest today was Marilyn August, owner of Sticky Profiles. That's stickyprofiles.com. And this has been the Professional Speakers Radio Show. Come back every Wednesday morning, and you'll get another dose of me and our guests. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Chris Kerr. Have a great week.